yeah, particularly around property,
Mm.
especially. So if you're buying a brand new house, you're buying a house and land package, then whatever they're building today, anything after the year 2000 is not going to be built from asbestos.
That's right.
It's not going to contain asbestos products. If you're
Mm.
building in Australia, there's other rules in Australia like formaldehyde. There used
Yes.
to be glues that would have formaldehyde in them. There's asbestos, which is harmful. Asbestos is
Very
harmful for the
harmful.
lungs. There's 100 different products that had asbestos in it.
Mm.
There's a very famous Australian personality that's on Channel 10 in the living room, Cherie
Yes.
Barber. Cherie Barber
She.
is one of the ambassadors in Australia for asbestos awareness. So
Mm.
she helps people understand that when you're renovating,
You
start,
have to
before
know
you
about
rip up
asbestos.
tiles, there
Mm.
might be asbestos glue underneath tiles.
Mm.
There might be that little black product underneath things that you don't know what it is. Sometimes that contains asbestos because asbestos is a natural product. You can find it in caves. But
Mm.
the the thing of it is that the fibers are so small that they float up in the air and they can be
And into
swallowed or
your
ingested
lungs.
into the lungs, and they lodge there, and then things build around them and
Cause
make mucky stuff in
horrible
your
things.
lungs. So
Yeah.
without going into the medical side of things,
Yeah.
asbestos is not good. So they've decided in Australia to not use asbestos. Um, they've also, and I thank the Australian government for this, both from a
Yes.
New South Wales feature, but also nationally. Sometimes the government has put in grants for inspections paid for by the government to
Mm.
come to your old house and check whether you have loose asbestos. What
Yes.
do I mean by loose asbestos? I don't know if you remember, Tony, but a few years ago there was a ceiling insulation
Yes. The.
bat, which was like a foam type thing, and they used
Mm-hmm.
to call them pink bats or
Yes.
insulation bats.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the flying critters, but they're
No,
just
the
insulation that went
insulation.
into your roof cavity.
Mm.
Some of them are made from wool, some of them are made from fiberglass, some of them are made from natural fibers.
Yes.
But in the olden days, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, okay, a little bit more recently, they were made with asbestos fibers
Yeah.
because it's a natural product, but it retains heat, it absorbs a lot of heat. So in engine bays of cars that got really hot and they
Mm.
wanted to deaden the sound and to
Yeah.
stop the hood from overheating, they would put a layer of asbestos over the engine, over the
Yeah.
car area.
Yeah.
In houses, similarly, underneath wet areas. So in your laundry, you might have laundry linoleum or laundry
Uh-huh.
tiles that might have a layer of black asbestos
It's
underneath.
underneath.
In the roof bats, they used to have fluffy type of material that had asbestos in it. One
Yeah.
of the big companies in Australia that made the news quite often was
Yes.
a company called Mr. Happy.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Fluffy.
Yes.
So I think it was either Mr. Happy or Mr. Fluffy. I have to check. I think it was
Yeah.
Mr. Fluffy.
Yeah.
But those bats had asbestos in it. So the government has said, we will send somebody in the full clothing,
Hazmat
which is
gear.
asbestos proof, almost a hazmat gear.
Mm.
It's a full clothing to stop
With
any
a
fibers going
ventilator
in,
mask.
a respirator.
Mm.
That's right, a ventilator mask, a respirator. And they will go in, they'll test whatever fluffy stuff you've got on your ceiling, whether it's
Yikes.
wool, whether it's fiberglass or something else. They'll send it through to the laboratory and they'll send you back the results to say, is your home the one that perhaps wasn't your, maybe you didn't build it, maybe you bought it 2 years ago, but somebody 30 years ago or 50 years ago put
Yeah.
asbestos into it. They'll
Yeah.
give you a certificate called a clearance certificate, or at
Uh-huh.
least a certificate to say there's no loose fill asbestos.
Mm.
Uh, but think of loose fill as the easiest things to float in the air.
Yes.
There's the fluffy stuff. So if you get a little bit of wind, that loose
It's
fill
just going to
asbestos can
go
go
everywhere.
through yeah, it can go through your air vents. You know how some
Yes.
walls have little ducts on the
Yes.
side? It
Float
can
through there.
go every time you open the hatchway to get into your ceiling space or
Mm-hmm.
to go under your house into your crawl space. They
Yes.
could have hazardous material above or below. So somebody great like Cherie Barber has done so much research, and if you have a look at her website,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of great asbestos information on there. But it's so important to
To know
cover the
about it.
big A,
Yeah.
to know that some walls are made from asbestos, some glues are made from asbestos. That doesn't mean that you should freak out and do nothing, but there's people with a
Correct.
license that have one of three licenses, either either an assessor
Yeah.
to assess whether you have,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody to remove the asbestos, or a different class of license called a Class A,
Mm-hmm.
which is to remove the really, really bad asbestos called friable
Yes.
asbestos. That doesn't mean you're allowed to cook it, but it's a
No,
different
it's
type of asbestos.
it's the
So
nasty
you
type of
can get
asbestos.
yeah,
Mm.
and it has to be buried in a different way. It has to be transported a different way,
And it
and
has to be
somebody who
encased and
might
all
have
sorts of things.
somebody who might have 10 renovations under their belt is still not an expert. Somebody who has 100 renovations under their belt is still not an expert. When I spoke to Cherie Barber, we met face to face.
Yeah.
She at that time had 116 renovations under her belt. She had completed 116 renovations.
Mm-hmm.
That to me speaks of somebody who's in the trenches, who knows
Yes.
what they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know what Cherie Barber does? She doesn't do her own asbestos inspection.
No.
She
She
pays
could.
for a licensed person to come out and to give her a written copy to say what's what not
Mm-hmm.
to remove, what should be removed by an expert, and just what looks from the surface to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
So there will always be things hidden inside a wall that's covering another wall, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
tell that.
Yeah.
But there are some things that are reasonably easy to work out because of the type of pattern or the brand name that's written on the product
Yes.
that's there.
Mm.
I don't want to spend an hour on this, but
No.
the
It's
eaves,
important
which
though.
if you
The
think about
eaves.
your outside of your house, the gutter,
Mm. Yes.
sometimes that surface between the gutter and your wall, that's called the eave, which is
Yes.
that little bit that stops the rain from hitting your windows. So that little protrusion from your house used to be
Often.
asbestos in almost everything. So almost every
Mm.
house you look at, every unit
Mm.
used to be asbestos, and now they use a different type of cladding, a different type of sheeting that doesn't
Yes.
have asbestos in it. But when an expert comes out, a licensed expert comes out and gives you the assessment, they might say, okay, well, you've got a certain number of eaves that are made from asbestos. If they're uncracked, undamaged, they'd recommend to do something.
This.
If they're already damaged, if there's a crack, they'd recommend to do something else.
Mm.
Listen to the experts. Tony, I always say
Definitely.